Welcome everyone. This is our Welfare Collective's tenancy event. I'm just sort of having David here helping us inform us about our rights as students with housing. So for anyone who doesn't know, the Welfare Collective is part of the SRC, and we do work that just furthers general student welfare, making sure that people can navigate their way through the world. And David here has very kindly agreed to help us in his capacity as a lawyer for our very own Arc. So big thank you, and I'll pass it on to you to introduce.
Thanks very much, Reid, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys tonight. I'm just trying to navigate PowerPoint, and it seems like the slides are working. Let's just try. Yep, okay, they are working. So yeah, as Reid said, I'm David. I'm one of the legal advisors with Arc. So my job is basically to give advice to you guys who are enrolled here at UNSW, and it's a pretty broad service. You know, we give advice obviously about housing is a very big one, also about visas, about accidents, about minor crime, about employment, intellectual property, and a lot of things related to the university itself. So, you know, we see a lot of cases of disciplinary matters and people applying for, you know, people appealing against decisions and that kind of stuff too. But tonight, obviously, we'll focus on housing. And look, for those of you who are international students, this is really important. The majority of our cases in tenancy affect international students much more than domestic students, and it may be because of being less familiar with the local law, or you know, I think the reality is that it's much harder to rent as an international student. You know, when you arrive in a city and a country that's not your own. So I'm going to go through the things you need to watch out for, and Reid and like I guess everyone else, you know, interrupt me if you've got questions about what's in the slides. You know, it can be a Q&A. Very quick note that if you need advice about something specific, please don't just rely on this. You know, this is up-to-date and correct information as of today, 14 July, but laws do change, and you know, there's a good chance that something in this space will change by the end of the year. So especially if you're watching this recording, you know, in a month's time or a year's time, some things may have changed. So I guess this is the situation in Sydney in 2022. It's become a very tight rental market after 2 years of absolute hell. The international borders are open again, and so there's a lot more competition for housing. And as you'll see in the news, rents have gone up greatly. Landlords are increasing the rent they charge, and the competition for actually getting a place is very high as well. So you need to understand the space you're working in, and I guess you know, the areas of vulnerability you might face, you know, when you're looking out for a rental accommodation. So what I was going to do tonight, and Reid and the others jump in, I want to show you generally what the things that we most commonly see in our cases, and the things you really need to be aware of when you're renting. And I'm also going to put in the chat links to important documents that you need to know about. So what the standard form tenancy agreement looks like, what a condition report looks like. And I'll also share my screen and show you what some dodgy agreements look like. So you want to know what you're looking out for. But at the broadest level, when you're a tenant in New South Wales, you must have a contract with your landlord that is the standard form tenancy agreement. So it's a document that has been created by the government and by Fair Trading. It's a standard form agreement, so all the terms of the law are included in that agreement, and it's downloadable from Fair Trading. So it's not something you've got to buy or that's hard to get. So make sure that your landlord gives you that correct agreement. And the kind of obvious things when you rent a property, the expectation is that they're in a reasonable state of cleanliness and fit for habitation. It doesn't mean they're perfect, but it means that there's minimum standards that you can expect. And that's things like adequate ventilation, the lighting and laundry facilities and toilet facilities and all those basics must work. They're non-negotiables. You can expect reasonable security, and that's door and window locks as a minimum. If you have to have repairs done, your landlord should be doing those. If you cause the damage, they might charge you for it. But if it's a problem with the property, the landlord needs to do that themselves. And things like notice for a rent increase. If you're on a fixed term lease, your rent can't be increased in that term unless there's a very exceptional situation where it can be, but it's very rare for a rent to be able to increase in the fixed term. Hey, Reid.
Yeah. I was just wondering.
Jumping in.
Oh yeah. For repairs for a rental property, if you kind of try to just take matters in your own hands, and say you accidentally make things worse, are you further liable? Do absolutely all repairs have to be done by landlords?
If you took matters into your own hands and caused damage, you're probably putting yourself at risk. So, the most elementary stuff like screwing in handles and that kind of basic stuff where anyone can do it isn't a problem. If it was something like a faulty lock, a faulty window, something to do with the structure of the building, you might actually have to involve strata there if you're in an apartment. So I'd probably be careful about anything but the most basic repairs you wouldn't want to do yourself, and you certainly wouldn't want to pay for them. If it was a problem that wasn't caused by you or your flatmates. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. So is it just kind of you just maybe saw the most basic ones, but then for anything that's really major, you'd want to get the landlord to do it, kind of thing?
Yes, like anything it's going to cost money. You shouldn't have to spend money on the property. So if it's just a minor adjustment, it's not going to be something that you'd tell the landlord about, I would think. But if a door is going to fall off its hinges, for example, or I'm trying to think of, if the place is furnished and there's a wonky leg on your main table that wasn't caused by by misuse, you're paying for that as well as for the property. So, you'd want those sort of repairs to be done by the landlord. Likewise, if there's mold, you can, excuse me, you can always bring in your own spray to deal with mold, and that's what I would recommend doing. Treat the mold yourself. But if it's something like water flowing in from a leak, where the mold is actually being caused by some external factor, that's got to be dealt with by the landlord, and it's a health hazard. So the vast majority of repairs you won't do yourself. You'd get the landlord to do it.
Because say like for example, there's like water's broken and your house is starting to flood, or a lock's broken, but the landlord's taking or they give you a really big time frame for coming to fix it, and you want to hire someone yourself. Is that kind of like, what's the situation there?
Yeah, so there is a section of the tenancy law, the Residential Tenancies Act, that defines urgent repairs. If you need urgent repairs done, then you tell the landlord immediately. So we're talking about, as you mentioned, a serious water leak, particularly if it was going to affect the electrics. Also, if things like the heating, like the oven or the gas is faulty, or the the toilet stops working, or the water connection fails. I mean, they're all urgent repairs, and you should expect the landlord to deal with those, in a day or two. I would hope at the most. What you can do if they don't act on that is you give them written notice that they are urgent repairs, and if they don't actually attend to them, you can arrange them yourself and get compensation of up to $1,000. That was the last time I looked; it was $1,000. But you've got to be very careful before you do that. You have to put them on notice in writing that you had an urgent repair situation before going and paying for repairs yourself. If you're with a real estate agent, generally they will just take care of that, and they'll have their own contracted people to do that. Also, in your tenancy agreement, there is a section on the first or second page, I think, and we'll go to it in a little while, where it says that people are nominated for repairs. So there'll usually be the name of a handyman or two for things like water leaks and electricity failures. So if there's a problem with the electrics, so you'll have people that are written into your agreement who you should call if something like that happens. Just make sure you tell the landlord that that's happened, though. If there is an electrical fault in the house, you're going to tell the landlord or the agent straight away. And I guess at the same time, you're going to, either they will call the tradesperson or you might. But for an urgent repair, like a broken toilet, or if the oven stops working, that's another urgent repair. Put the landlord on notice that it has happened and that they need to fix it, and then there's a certain amount of time that they have to do those repairs, and if they don't, you can get them done and get compensation for the expense of doing that.
Yeah, cool. No, that's good to know.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I think if anyone's on the call is in that situation where you've got an urgent repair, have a look in your agreement, because it actually discusses what you can do. If you've got the standard form agreement. And actually, this is why it's so important to have the right agreement, because the dodgy agreements will never talk about this stuff. That they'll only, they'll just leave it out altogether. Yeah. Other things. So it's really important that you give the right notice for things, and also that your landlord gives you the right notice. So, for instance, 60-day minimum for a rent increase. If you're in a periodic agreement, so it's not a fixed term agreement, then your landlord needs to give you 60 days notice of a rent increase, and that's only once a year. If they want to inspect, then they've got to give you 7 days written notice, and termination is a whole more other complicated story. But if you're in a periodic agreement, they've got to give you a minimum 90 days notice of termination. It's different if the property's for sale, and there are a few other circumstances where it's different, but generally they've got to give you there's very specific notice periods that they have to give you, and also that you have to give your landlord. I'm going to talk quite a bit about rental bond as well, but overall, it's really important that your rental bond is lodged with the New South Wales Bond Board, and your landlord doesn't keep it. They're not allowed to do that. What's going on with my slides? Okay, here we go. Generally, you'll be on a 6-month or a year lease. Now, if you're in a boarding house, and we'll talk about what the difference is in a while, they are usually shorter. Just note there, if you're renting from an agent, they'll be much more on top of this than a private landlord. So agents are often the better option. And really, really important is make sure that your name is on the lease. Don't live in a house or an apartment where other people are on the lease and you're not. It's really, really critical. Share housing, pretty common. I usually tell people try and flat with people that you know to some extent, so you don't have you don't find out things about people in a few months that you didn't know. And also, if you have a partner or a spouse, wife or husband or whatever, you'll probably be on the lease jointly. So there's broad categories of renting. Broad categories of accommodation. So we've got standard renting where you're a tenant, and the key things with renting as a tenant is that you've got what they call exclusive possession, which means that the landlord doesn't have the right to come in. The landlord doesn't have the right to just insist that they enter the property when they want. So there's two notions: exclusive possession and quiet enjoyment means the right to exclude the landlord. And other things there that you can see, the bond I've talked about. Generally, if you'll be providing your furniture. If you're living in a boarding house, and there are a lot of boarding houses around near the campus, like around Kingsford, around near where the restaurants are. If you're living in a boarding house, a lot of this doesn't apply as much. So be careful about, just be aware of what type of agreement you've got. If you're living in a boarding house, you're going to have a lot less privacy. You'll probably be renting from a company, not from an individual, and you just don't have the same sort of legal protection. But you also shouldn't be paying any more than 2 weeks rent as bond or security deposit. Your landlord can ask you for some information about yourself. Generally, it's going to be about your financial circumstances and whether you have been a good tenant in the past. So expect that, an agent will ask you about this. Just make sure that they don't ask you, ask you anything that's a personal nature. So your age, your gender, sexuality, those things have nothing to do with your tenancy. And be really careful if you are asked about those things. Now, what I think I'll do, I might put in the chat after we finish with the slides, links to the documents that you need, so you know what they look like. When you sign a standard tenancy, you'll sign the residential tenancy agreement. If you're subletting, then the best agreement to sign is what's called the share housing agreement, produced by Redfern Legal Centre and the Tenants Union. You must, so important, you must sign a condition report at the start and at the end of the tenancy. So that's proof of the condition when you move in, so you're not blamed for things you didn't do. And if you happen to be in a boarding house, you'll have a different contract. It'll be called something different to a residential tenancy agreement, but it should refer to what are called the occupancy principles. So minimum standards for boarding houses. And they cover things like how much notice you'll have for moving out, increases of rent and those sorts of matters. Just reiterate this. It's so important that no matter what sort of situation you're living in, you've got to ensure that you are on a written agreement. It's very risky not to be it's very risky for you not to be on an agreement at all. Reid.
Oh yeah. I just wanted to jump in and say, we'll definitely be saving those links for when we eventually post. But I also wanted to ask about those kind of details that you give to the landlord, especially about references. Just because I know there's a lot of of confusion around it, just because sometimes I hear people get asked for previous landlords when it's their first time moving out. What qualifies as a reference for us. So different
there's no real clear answer to that one, really. I mean, if it is your first rental ever, Um, and obviously everyone's going to be in that situation at some point. Sometimes people will ask for a guarantee. I've seen that done. I think they'll probably place more emphasis on your financial circumstances. So they might want to see that you've got regular employment. I mean, they shouldn't be delving too much into your personal life, and going over your whole financial background. But yeah, the first rental, it's going to be impossible to provide a referee. But I guess in the first rental, you're probably going to be in a share house for the first time as well, compared to the third or fourth time where you might be renting on your own or with a partner. So I've seen situations where one person on the lease, like one person is on the lease, and they've had quite a long rental history, and then they might sublet to other people, which is all right. Yeah, I guess you've just got to do a sort of assessment of your financial circumstances as well.
Oh,
yeah.
Like it's kind of sort of case by case, like depending on.
I think it is a bit, yeah. And yeah, I mean, an agent's going to, yeah, like some agents will want someone to go guarantor for your rental payments. So I've seen parents do that, when it's the very first time that they're renting. But they can't ask for things like 6 months rent in advance. I know some people do pay that, but yeah, they can't force you to do that.
Cool.
Yeah. It's a really important thing, guys. A lot of people, a lot of students see us, and they're told by the landlord that the bond, that the landlord just refuses to lodge their bond, register their bond with fair trading. And a lot of landlords just get away with this, and it's actually completely illegal. Your landlord has to give you the right to lodge your bond through what's called rental bonds online. There's actually quite a heavy fine if they don't do that, and you can report them to fair trading. But anyone who's been renting, anyone who rents to students, they've been doing this for a long time and they know this. So, just stand your ground and insist that you pay your bond to fair trading. Don't ever give it to the landlord, and especially don't give it to them in cash. That's the worst thing you can do. Now, getting bond back, probably the biggest single issue. So a landlord can't just hold on to the bond, and they've got to be very specific about why they think they can claim it. So if a landlord at the end of the tenancy wants some of your bond because they're saying that there's damage, they need to give you copies of the proof of their expenses. So they have to show you, the receipts for whether it's cleaning costs or receipts or an invoice for repairs, if they think that you've caused damage. They can't just claim the bond because they want the place in a better state than it was when you first rented it. So the legal term is fair wear and tear. So at the start of your tenancy, you'll do your condition report. So just very important for you to mark any damage, anything that's not 100% in the property, any marks on the floor, on the walls. Take photographs, as many photographs as you can of the condition at the start. And at the end, if the place is more or less the same as what it was at the beginning, and just a few, random marks here and there that are going to happen anyway, that's just normal use, which is what fair wear and tear means. So they can't claim for fair wear and tear. If you leave the place in a complete pigsty, then they would be able to claim cleaning costs. Like if you just left, and that's actually happened in a few weird cases we've had, where there was a bit of a party house. But generally the landlord, they're going to have a bit of a difficult time claiming the bond unless they can actually show a condition report, show the difference in the two conditions, and they've also got proof of their expenses. If your landlord is claiming bond, I always advise people to get in first. So claim the bond yourself, either through Rental Bonds Online, put a claim in, or you can use Fair Trading's form and submit that by email to Fair Trading. So get ahead of the landlord. And if you do that, then the landlord themselves have to go to the Civil and Administrative Tribunal to claim the bond. So that's a way for you to get in first. Now, I don't want to alarm people. These are the signs of dodgy agreements. I've had a lot of experience of seeing dodgy agreements. Anything that's not in English, anything that's not standard form, if it's written by the landlord themselves, if a landlord insists that you're paying in cash, or if they want you to transfer money through Western Union, run a mile. That's either the sign of dodginess at the very least, or a scam at the worst. It's really important that you know who the landlord is as well. So we've got a few landlords who will only give a person their first name. You mustn't let that happen. You know, you've got to know who the person is. You're entering into a contract with them, so you need to know who you're dealing with. And also, if they won't let you do an inspection, that's another warning sign. So be real careful of that. Unfortunately, there are scams, just like there are with so many other scams in the world at the moment. Rental scams are big. And that's usually where someone says that they've got a property for rent, and if you send them money, they will send you the keys for it. And the warning sign for that is if, again, they want you to pay by Western Union or some other afterpay type service. So be really, really careful of rental scams. We've had students who've lost thousands of dollars, unfortunately, through scams. And I think the best way to do that is to go through, use the mainstream websites like realestate.com domain, and UNSW's got a good site called Study Stays. So I would use those to find a place. A quick note on boarding houses. So you may be in a boarding house and not know it. You can find out if it's a boarding house if it's registered on the New South Wales Register, but it'll also be a boarding house in this situation. If there are 5 or more people living there, apart from the owner, they've actually got to register that as a boarding house with council. And boarding houses can be nasty because they're not always kept up to date with things like smoke alarms and fire escapes. So, you know, if you're in a situation where there's, 10 or 12 people living in the same house, that's a boarding house, and you want to make sure that the person who's running it is keeping up to date with with the health and safety law, and also that they've given you a proper contract. We've had a few terrible boarding house situations, like fires and other things. Quick note on homestay. That's probably where you've got the least amount of rights. You're just basically living in someone else's house, and they will give you food and furniture, and you'll generally go through an agency. But it can be nice because you do get to know a family well. So, tips for moving in: make sure that you don't pay more than 2 weeks rent in advance, unless you really want to, but you can't be forced to do that. Please don't pay more than 4 weeks rent as bond. Any more than 4 weeks is illegal. And as I said earlier, do the condition report, and do take photographs and possibly videos as well of the condition of the place. Reed.
Yep, me again.
You again.
Yeah. I just wanted to kind of go back to boarding houses for a sec, just to ask about the floor space or the max amount of people that's allowed. So kind of how do you kind of know when it's too much, and then if it is too much, what are the kind of actions that can be taken?
Um, I mean, I suppose no one's going to walk around with a tape measure and work out if if they've got that exact amount of floor, but that's what the law says. Um, but I mean, if you're in a place that's overcrowded, especially if you're living in a place where there's 3 or 4 people in a room and it's bunk beds, obviously that's not acceptable, or it's not going to make the minimum for a boarding house. You'd probably want to be talking to the local council, and in a few cases, we've even had people go to the police where it was actually a fire hazard, and they've had to get, we've had it. There've been fires in boarding houses close to the campus. So talk to council. God, talk to get legal advice. Come and talk to us, or talk to Kingsford Legal Centre, or Tenants Advice Service, and we can get onto them and tell them what they're doing, and what might happen if they don't fix it.
Because just kind of out of curiosity, when it says no less than 5.5 square meters of floor area per person in any room used for sleeping, so you kind of say so say just a bedroom, not the whole house, is 11 square meters. That means maximum 2 people can live there.
Yeah, I suppose they could. Yeah,
because it's just counting just counting bedroom floor space and not like the whole house's floor space.
Yeah. Well, you would count, and this is where it gets a bit of a concern too, because I've seen situations where rooms that are not bedrooms are still being used as as places for sleeping, especially where fake walls are put up. So yeah, like you disregard any rooms that are not bedrooms, and I guess you just got to look at common sense and say, is it a bedroom, or is it something else? If you're I'm not sure if if your concern is how do you sort of work this out, and I don't think there's like a formula. Like kind of general principles. But I think I think if 3 or 4 people were crammed into a bedroom that was obviously meant for 1 or 2, and it's not a private house, it's being run as a business, that's where it really does become a compliance issue, and that's where you want to go to council to say, like, and there are these places just near that McDonald's, close to campus. I know some addresses that are actual boarding houses that are not registered as such. So, that where they've got, it's a 4-bedroom house, but there's 12 people in there, and that's where it's a problem.
Okay.
Because it's just not safe really, or it's not particularly hygienic, when you've just got 1 kitchen and 1 bathroom too. So I hope that answers your question, mate. It's
Oh yeah. So it's kind of like a common sense sort of thing.
Yeah, I think you got to sort of apply some common sense to it, and just look at. I will show some photos in a little while, in a moment, from a boarding house where you can see what sort of an extreme example. But certainly, if you are in a place where there's if it looks like a submarine or something, where there's multiple bunk beds, and it's clearly not designed for that. It's just a private home. It's not it's not a place that's designed for camping, or they're not actually, it's not a commercial operation, but it's still being used like that. That's where it's a big problem. Because fires can start and all kinds of things can happen. There's a couple of other things. Like while you're living there, some good tips: just make sure that you don't go on a rent strike with your landlord if they're really pissing you off about something. Withholding rent as a kind of revenge strategy is a very bad idea, because that's a breach of the agreement. What you can do is apply to the tribunal to have your rent paid to the tribunal instead, while the dispute's going on. But as a rule, don't don't ever go on a rent strike. Report repair requests. If you're renting through an agent, a lot of agents will have a repair maintenance portal on their website. So you can log jobs with your agent through that portal. If you haven't got that and it's just a private landlord, just make sure when you sign the agreement that you're aware of who to contact if there is an emergency. They should have a nominated tradesperson. Now, look, a controversial one, because I don't know how to say this delicately, but even if your landlord and you speak a language other than English, and that is both your kind of native languages, when you're talking about the property, when you're talking about your tenancy, please use English. Basically, because it's no use to someone like me to get a bunch of text messages or a contract that is in a language I don't understand. It's really hard to give advice, and it's also very hard for the tribunal because you've got to get a translator. And I think if you communicate in English with a landlord who wants to communicate in a different language, we're talking about a very important legal right here. So, there's got to be a reason why they're doing that if they want to put everything in a language that they know a lawyer like me can't understand. Don't change locks without permission. That's really important. A couple of other things. Make sure your landlord doesn't just come around and check up on you. If they want to inspect, as I said, they've got to give 7 days notice. If they need to do repairs, whether you ask for them or they need to be done, they need to give you 2 days notice. They can only inspect 4 times a year. And there are some good online bill sharing services that are around. So it's less of a tenancy thing. It's more of just how to get on with your housemates. But that's a good way to keep track of who's paid what bills. When you're moving out, make sure you give them the right notice. So 14 days before your fixed term period ends, if you want to move out, give 14 days notice and put it in writing. If you're on a continuing lease, give 21 days notice. Again, put it in writing. Pardon me, sorry. And just the obvious things here, keep everything up to date. Be careful about terminating a fixed term lease early because you could lose money. And there's break fees set out in your contract. But the most that your landlord can claim is 4 weeks rent, I'm sorry. So your landlord can't ask you to pay for the whole contract. They used to be able to try and do that, but the law now says that depending on when you break your lease, the most that they can get compensated for is 4 weeks rent. Here are some important misconceptions. For the international students listening, your landlord cannot report you to the university or report you to immigration if you complain about them or if you take them to the tribunal. So the two things have got nothing to do with each other. And I say that because I've had hundreds of people ask me about that. If you've got a dispute with your landlord and it goes to court or it goes to the tribunal, got nothing to do with your visa. Please don't give your landlord your passport or driver's license or anything. Don't pay for cleaning. You're not legally required to pay for cleaning unless you have a pet. If you keep a dog or a cat or something, then you can be asked to pay for professional cleaning, but otherwise, no. Just be careful of being charged more than 2 weeks rent in advance, and please never give your landlord a credit card authorization or one of those arrangements where they can take money out of your account as a direct debit, because then you can find yourself paying more than you expect. And also, if you're in an apartment, it's very unlikely you'll be paying for water unless you have a separate account, a separate meter for your water. Then you shouldn't be paying for water. Now, finally, I think we're almost to the end. A few random tips. Subletting is fine, but I think get advice before you do it and make sure that you use the agreement that I'll share with you in a sec from the tenants union. If you rent a place that has a garage and you don't have a car, it might be tempting to rent that garage out to someone who wants to use it for storage. Please don't do that. I've had to go to court 4 or 5 times to get crap out of people's garages. And you just don't know what people are storing in there, and it can be illegal items as well. So be very suspicious of someone who wants to rent out a garage, unless it's for a car. I guess if they want to use it just as a car space, maybe that's fine. But yeah, never do that. I mentioned urgent repairs, and just watch out for any weird fees that your landlord wants to charge you, like like a late fee on your rent. They can't charge you things like that. Okay, we're almost at the end. So if you need advice about tenancy, there's lots of places you can go. Fair Trading's got a good website. Tenants Union is a great resource, and they've got loads of fact sheets, the Tenants Union. Please look at those before and during your tenancy. And the legal centers and us, of course, at Arc, you're always welcome to contact us if you need tenancy advice. This is a notorious person who rents in the Kingsford area. Her name is Marie. We're not entirely sure what her real, actually, no, we know what her real name is, but I won't tell you that, but she calls herself Marie. She is not Marie, and uses this agreement as a standard one and rents to basically international students. Like some things in here are illegal, and you can see, it's not a standard agreement. So if you are asked to sign something like that, especially if you don't have from this agreement, we don't know the person's address, we don't know their real name, we don't know how to contact them if there's a problem, because there is no phone number on it, and there's no email, and there's no address. So that is a warning sign of a shonky agreement. So you want to avoid things like that.
Yeah, I do have one question, but were you going to show us sort of really overcrowded boarding houses?
Oh, hang on. I'll tell you what, let me show you. Actually, one photo I've got. This is a terrible example of the kind of thing that we saw this a couple of years ago, actually. But this is the kind of thing this is why it's a problem. So this is one of a number of photos we took from this place. I don't know if you can see that.
I think that's 9.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And I've got probably 4 or 5 other photos, but there are, if you look at the rest of the house, there's 3 or 4 bunk beds. There's about 100 pairs of shoes. This is all hooked up to, a multiple power points. Incredibly dangerous. So, and there was no oven. It was hooked up with a gas, one of those gas things that is attached to barbecues. So that's a bit of an extreme example, but they're around. So you've got to watch out. That's why, do an inspection before you sign the contract.
Sure. Awesome. No, I just kind of wanted to ask about utilities. Just because I know there's some agreements where you pay for like electricity and internet and what have you yourself, and others where it's included in the rent. And you kind of mentioned that sort of you don't have to pay for your own water if there's no separate meter. Could you give a bit more detail about that?
Yeah. So generally, apartments in a strata plan may not have a separate water connection that goes specifically to that apartment. So the water will go to the whole premises, but there won't be a clear contract for the water that's just used in that particular lot, I guess, put it that way. in a house or a terrace, you'll always have a separate meter, so your name is probably going to be on that contract for water. But if your landlord includes the water, and I've seen some landlords include the water as part of the rent, and it's probably a bit hard to argue that one, because they're just going to increase the rent. They'll either say that the water's included or they'll just charge you more rent. But yeah, they shouldn't be giving you the water bill to pay in an apartment, unless the water is, sorry, what am I saying? Unless the water account is specifically for that property, and it's so that it's separately metered.
Okay, so it's kind of like
Follow that?
Yeah, so it's like if there's like one apartment block with 10 apartments, but say there's only 1 meter for the entire block, water should be kind of included in the rent by the landlord. But say if instead that same block, but there were 10 meters for each of the apartments, and you're renting one of them, then usually it'd be you pay for your own water because you kind of
yeah exactly, because then you can work out what you've actually used. Yeah.
Cool. All right.
You want me to
Any other any other questions at all?
Anything else, guys?
Yeah, okay. I'll just ask one.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm Louis.
How you going, man?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. So would you recommend that all first-time renters, regardless of whether they're international or not, just go through a legal service like Arc, for example, or Legal Aid to just get a grip on what renting is like? So when they're renting for the first time,
the
landlord gives them all the paperwork. They take that paperwork to a legal center to get it verified that it is legit paperwork, for example.
Look, you're totally welcome to do that through us. And I think you can probably do that through someone like Kingsford Legal Centre as well. Legal aid might be harder to get into. I think they'd see, they'd probably help you if you already had a problem. I don't know if they'd look at the contract before you'd signed it, but we always, we're happy to do that. It's actually a really good idea, because you can see if you've got a problem from the start before you get into something dodgy.
All right. Yep. Any other questions? No. Oh, you got a question? Sorry.
Oh, there's a whole lot of people hiding in there. Hi, how you doing?
I'm gonna share house of our own.
I want to ask about the case of tenant with our written contract. Having moving into a unit, but there's no written contract. They just some message about the money and
that's exactly the kind of thing that worries me. Because you don't know. Are they refusing to give you a contract?
No, I think they're just being lazy.
That happens
more
too.
like a housemate. More like it's like a sublet. I think that what you call right?
And they're not the owners, I guess, are they? They're just
I think so. They're not the owner.
I mean, we haven't actually gone to the tribunal and seen whether text messages would be enough to be called a written agreement. I mean, I it's in writing, so I guess maybe they would see it that way. But it's just not the best idea for anyone. It's better to have if you go to the chat, that link that's in there, the share housing agreement. If you sign that, I mean, it protects you and it protects them, because then you're clear about how long you're there for, what room you're using. So I don't know, if you can try and convince them that it's a good idea to use that agreement, I'd probably try.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. David.
I'll just put a note in the chat. If anyone needs, if you want to reach out to us, you're welcome to contact us. And this is our email address, which is advice@arc.edu.au. And that actually comes through to me and a couple other people. So if anyone wants anyone wants advice about tenancy or about a lot of other stuff, you're welcome to email us, and we will arrange to meet you.
All right. Cool. I think that's just about everything then. Wait, sorry, were you going to ask another question?
No, I'm just asking you.
Oh yeah, we'll hop off the call then. Okay, yeah. All right, yeah, no, all right. I guess that just about wraps it up. We are going to be posting the recording on the SRC Welfare Collective's Facebook page for sure. Maybe on Instagram, but that just about wraps it up for today, I reckon. Unless anyone interjects with last minute questions. Thanks so much for attending, and special thank you to David again.
Thank you for everyone to coming and listening. Yeah, do reach out, for help if you got problems in your accommodation. Yeah, don't sort of sit in silence or worry. There's plenty of places you can get help.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Reed.
All right. Thanks so much.